Before we get any further into the video, have you checked out my Spotify playlist? I add new stuff to it pretty much anytime I find a cool new song, so I update it usually a couple times a week with some new stuff. So if you are looking for new music to check out, hit the link in the description of this video. It is time for episode number 2 of 10 out of 10 albums that are no skips, in which I will tell you my personal list of albums that are 10s. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying this is like the definitive list. I'm not saying that you should like these. I'm just saying this is my opinion, because people ask me fairly often, hey, what albums do you think are great from start to finish? And this is my list. Now, to me, what makes something a 10 is exactly that. Can I listen to the whole thing from start to finish without sort of, looking for that skip button? And I will say some of these may not be quite as strong in the no skips department as the ones from the first episode, but still, these are all albums that I can listen to from start to finish that for me are 10s. So, in no particular order, the first one that I would say, this is one that a lot of people brought up, Homesick by A Day to Remember. I'm guessing that most of you have heard this, but just in case you haven't, I did sort of forget it. People were like, oh, I was expecting that you would say that was one of your 10 out of 10 albums. And I just forgot. This album is definitely no skips. No question. I remember when this came out, it just completely blew my mind. I had heard some of their other stuff. You know, the Day to Remember hipsters will tell you that their first 2 albums, or especially Their Heart Was Treason, the hipsters will tell you that's their best album. Those hipsters are wrong. Early Day to Remember stuff, it's okay. It's not bad. You can hear the potential. I heard that stuff and I was like, yeah, it's all right. But this is the album where it really, really came together. I remember I heard this and I was just like, what the fuck is this? This sounds like Blink-182, but like tuned to drop B. What is this? I don't know, but I love it. Were they the first band to combine pop punk with breakdowns? Probably not. But I don't really think it's that important who did something first. What I think matters is who does it best, or who sort of pioneers it, or who makes the thing popular. And that's definitely this album. And I would say that this overall, I still think is their best album. Common Courtesy is also really good, but I think this is their best album. Tom Denny here, you can see this is the guy getting arrested. Tom Denny was their guitarist for the first couple albums. I think he wrote a lot of this stuff, and he quit the band after this. He continued to work with them a little bit for the next few albums, but I feel like maybe losing him is part of what made me sort of not like their later stuff as much. Either way, to me, like, this album, just absolute classic. It's up there with like Enema of the State for me. It's up there with like Vulgar Display of Power. That's how much I love this album, even though I was like 29 or something when this came out. Obviously way older than the target audience, but absolute classic to me. I've listened to this probably over 1,000 times. I still don't think anybody has done this style better. I know there's the hipsters out there that will tell you it's 4 Years Strong or Set Your Goals, or, you know, some of these other, or maybe the Wonder Years. That is cap. That is cap. This album is bussin', for real, for real. I tried to say it with a straight face, but I couldn't. It's cap. When it comes to pop punk with breakdowns, this is the definitive album. I don't think anybody will ever do this style better than they did. I don't think it can be done. It's as close to perfect as an album can possibly be. Even the ballad, I don't usually like acoustic ballads, but this one, I would say, does hold up. You know, If It Means a Lot to You is on this. I would say it's pretty great. I love it. Next up, we have another album kind of in the pop punk vein, Dookie by Green Day. Everybody knows this album, of course. This is still my favorite Green Day song.
Do you have the time?
These are songs that you can still play to people that don't even like punk or rock at all. They still will know this song. That's how good these songs are. That's how great this album is. And what I especially like about this album, in particular with Green Day, is I feel like this is the perfect sort of period in their career where they still sounded punk, but they were a little bit more polished. So it's that perfect sort of Goldilocks of like not too raw but not too polished, because their early stuff I think is really good. Kerplunk is definitely like, they're good songs, but the production is like really bad, and I think they were probably, I don't know, they were like kids when they did that, so it's not quite there. And then their later stuff, when they started getting into more of their sort of Elton John phase and whatnot, is just, it's well done, but it's too It's too slick for me. And they get into the, the Boulevard of Broken Dreams and all that kind of thing. Those are great songs, don't get me wrong. But for me personally, those just get a little bit too self-indulgent and a little too kind of, I guess for lack of a better word, a little bit too rock. You know what I mean? Whereas this still sounds like pop punk. This is like the best version of Lookout Records, like East Bay pop punk that anybody ever did. There were other bands that were good, like 15 and Crimp Shrine and Cringer and stuff like that. They were certainly good, but Green Day did it better than anyone else, no question. And this album to me is like the definitive example of that sound, and I think it is Green Day at their very best. The other stuff is definitely good. I'm not saying their other albums are bad, but I think this is just the perfection of like Green Day's sound. Nobody will ever do this sound better than they did. This is like the pinnacle of the genre in the same way as Appetite for Destruction. Appetite for Destruction is the pinnacle of that like sleazy, like Sunset Strip 80s kind of, sleaze rock. Vulgar Display of Power and Far Beyond Driven are the pinnacle of like groove metal. This is the pinnacle of that like early 90s Lookout Records pop punk kind of sound. 10 out of 10 classic. It goes on the list. Next, City Morgue Volume 2. This was my most streamed artist of 2019, I think. For anyone who's not familiar, they're, I guess you would call them trap metal. Although it's not metal and it's not trap, but that's what they call them. Still listen to this one all the time. It does go. It goes. I think the combo, Zillakami and So Smula are both good on their own, but I think what really makes City Morgue great is the combination of the two of them. I actually like So Smula's verse in this better. Still listen to this one all the time. I don't know why people call this trap metal, because it's not really metal and it's also not trap, but either way, I'll put them under the heading of trap metal. I would say out of all the stuff that came out of that scene in the sort of 2014 to 2019 kind of era, I think this album holds up better than any of it. Every song in this album is a single. Like, the difference between what City Morgue did and what a lot of these other sort of artists in this genre did is City Morgue actually has songs. It kind of actually reminds me more of Lil Jon than it does Death Grips. I don't really understand why people always compare him to Death Grips. I think maybe because rock people just don't really have another frame of reference. But in any case, this album to me is just like back-to-back singles, and every line out of every song is a hook. The beats are great. Their later stuff is definitely good. They went a little bit more nu metal with the next album. They added more guitars and stuff. I don't think guitars sound good in this style. This one is more rap and less rock than their other stuff. I think it's the best stuff. Another certified 10 out of 10 classic in my book. Next up on this list, Nevermind by Nirvana. You may think this is a cliched pick. You may think, oh, how obvious. The Gen Xer thinks Nirvana is great. It's true. I am a Gen Xer, and I do think Nirvana is great, and I do think that this album is fucking incredible. If you're old enough to remember when it came out, you'll know this is true. You've heard people say a million times that when this album came out, it changed everything overnight in music and culture in general, and it is true. It did. There is no other way to put it. Once Smells Like Teen Spirit broke, it changed literally the whole world. I mean, pretty much overnight. Not just music, but like fashion, culture, like basically, you've seen the 80s was like, this is from 1990, I think. This is what it looked like before Nirvana. And by the way, this aesthetic is fucking fire. I was in like 6th grade when this came out, probably. I wanted to look like this so badly. And to be honest, I still do. Like, maybe I should go like buy some of this shit on Depop or something like that, just so that I can relive my 6th grade dreams. I can finally be the cool guy that I wished I could have been in 6th grade. In any case, this is what was cool. This is like a year before Nevermind came out, and this looks like laughable, right? This looks like a joke. But look at Nirvana. Look at a picture of them from, again, this is like a year or two later. This looks like you could dress like this today and it would look totally normal and fine and cool, right? That is how big of an impact they had. It really, really did change everything literally overnight. This album was regarded as like a generational classic for a reason, because it was. I would say, Guns N' Roses is up there too, as far as like cultural impact. Also, The Chronic by Dr. Dre, which I don't like that album, but I would say that album also was up there in terms of that like transformational cultural impact. Those two albums to me, The Chronic and Nevermind, to me, were the things that really defined 90s culture. Like if you think of the 90s as being the period where things like became dark and edgy and sort of like gritty, those are the two albums that I would say really kicked that off. And I agree with this. Also, Nirvana were a band who could be edgy while having hooks. New bands could take a lesson or two from them. Absolutely. Every song on this album is so fucking catchy, even though they're so dark and kind of oppressive and depressive. It's still really catchy, and normal people could listen to it too. You don't have to be depressed to like Nirvana. These are like catchy songs that you can listen to just because you like the sound of it. I think really this is one of those albums, same with the Beatles, where like when people say the Beatles are overrated or whatever, I think they're just being contrarian and stupid. Like if you don't like Nirvana, that's fair, but there's no way that you could like possibly say that Nirvana sucks. You know what I mean? That's just a stupid opinion. That's just stupid. You can't say the Beatles suck either. Like I wouldn't necessarily choose to listen to the Beatles, but to say that they suck is just stupid. So to me, just do I like this album? Yes, absolutely. But also in terms of like cultural impact, to me, it really doesn't get much more important or more interesting and more just, I mean, it's really iconic. I mean, maybe it is partly my age, but the impact of this album just absolutely cannot be overstated. My mom, who is a Black Southern Baptist, loves this album. There you go. I didn't live through the Nirvana era, so it has less of an emotional impact, but it has a banger of an album. That's fair enough. Moving on to the 2000s, or maybe this is from 99, I guess. I don't remember. The first album from Newfound Glory, the self-titled album, Newfound Glory. Their second album was really good too, but I like this one the best. Love that snare. Listen to that 90s piccolo snare. What I really like about this album is this and Enema of the State are really the definitive, and I guess you could say that Sticks and Stones as well, but Newfound Glory and Blink-182 to me are the definitive examples of that TRL core sound, which for anybody who's too young to remember or maybe just forgot, TRL was MTV's show Total Request Live. That's where you would go to find out what was cool, and it became like a real cultural touchstone for teenagers. I was out of high school by the time TRL started, but still, like I was aware of how important TRL was. These bands like Newfound Glory, Sum 41, and Blink-182 and Good Charlotte were on TRL all the time. This was like the last time that pop punk was really like part of teenage mainstream culture. And what I really liked about it is how not edgy it is. I remember reading an interview with them from back then where they talked about how they liked going to chain restaurants. And I remember from Chad, he used to be in this band called Shai Hulud, and these guys were part of the like South Florida hardcore scene. I didn't know them personally, but I was sort of aware of who they were. I just found that stuff really relatable because although I've been listening to hardcore and death metal and stuff my whole life, and I completely get all that stuff. Like I really resonated with this kind of version of pop punk more than even like the Lookout Records stuff. Could be a little bit kind of mopey, and a lot of those people just really like fucked up, dysfunctional people that were, you know, a lot of drug addicts and homeless people and stuff like that. And I'm not putting those people down, but I've never really wanted to like wallow in messages of darkness. You know what I mean? I get it. I've done plenty of drugs. I've been around plenty of drugs. I've been around plenty of dysfunctional, sad people and stuff like that, blah, blah, blah. But I don't want to wallow in it, you know, like, especially when I'm listening to pop punk, I want to escape from that. You know, I want a more like wholesome, fun PG-13 version of it. You know what I mean? I don't want to like hang out with a pop punk band that's like train hopping junkies sniffing glue outside Gilman Street. You know, that's just not my thing. I'm not putting those people down, but that is not what I'm here for. Not my thing. I want fun. Exactly. They made it accessible to non-fucked up people. That's exactly right. To me, I would say it's really neck and neck. Like this album and Enema of the State are really neck and neck for me. And also the I forget which song it is, but the video where they had Rachel Lee Cook in it. I mean, come on, they got Rachel Lee Cook in a video. That means, you know what that means? They got to smell Rachel Lee Cook. If I ever meet any of these guys again, I'll say, hey, Jordan, what did Rachel Lee Cook smell like? Come on, just describe it to me. Tell me what she smelled like. What does she smell like? That's what I want to know. Takes notes, start band and smell girl. I mean, she looks like she would smell really good, doesn't she? She looks like she smells really nice. She looks like that type of girl. Smells wonderful. Now, on the heavier side of things, we have the classic Effigy of the Forgotten by Suffocation. From 1991. When it comes to like brutal death metal, this is the blueprint, hands down, no question. Yes, every song. You can listen to this whole album front to back, it holds up. No skips. Mike Smith's drumming, what a beast. Absolute savage. You know what's crazy? They were probably like 21 when they did this. Isn't that crazy? Can you imagine playing this shit when you're 21? In 1991 to tape with no click track probably? This part here, where they essentially pioneered the whole genre of slam metal. By now, everyone knows what slam is, and this part right here is the part that really created the whole genre of slam metal. Although, I gotta give credit to Internal Bleeding for coming up with the term slam. That's Internal Bleeding. But in terms of the riff that really created the genre, this is it right here. Right here. The riff. 911? Hello? Is this the Slam Police? I still listen to this album sometimes. It's so catchy, you know, Suffocation's catchiness is underrated. For obviously not having any vocal melody, somehow between the guitars and the vocal patterns and stuff, they actually managed to make this style of music pretty catchy for what it is. If you're into death metal, especially old school death metal, you absolutely cannot sleep on Effigy of the Forgotten by Suffocation. Pierced from Within is also good, but I would say Effigy of the Forgotten is the best one. The final 10 out of 10 album for this installment is Headspace by Issues. Absolute incredible masterpiece. This is my favorite song by Issues, I think. What a strange album. Like, there's nothing that sounds like this before or since. It's such a weird sound. Like, part funk, part metalcore, part boy band. It's a great song. Some of the best bass playing you'll ever hear, too. Sky Accord is a ridiculous bassist. I know, it's hard to believe a bass can be a real instrument. You don't have to program your bass. Now, what I think is interesting from the chat here, I completely agree. It's funky math soulcore, exactly. This album is really underrated as what it actually is, which is essentially progressive metal, because, I mean, clearly it's metal. They're tuned to like A or something like that. It's very djenty, but at the same time, they have these big pop choruses. They've got the funky stuff. They've got some like electronic and rap sort of stuff going on. It's like legitimately one of those progressive pieces of music you will ever hear, at least progressive like metal. You know, people think that progressive metal means just playing really fast and, you know, jacking off all over your guitar. It is the opposite. Progressive means doing something that is interesting and different, that moves the genre forward, that sort of questions or throws out some of the conventions, and that is exactly what this does. When else are you going to hear people combine Backstreet Boys with Meshuggah with Michael Jackson? You know what I mean? That's what this is. Very, very interesting progressive shit. They don't like this album. I don't know why. I mean, well, I sort of know why, but they don't like this album. I think they're crazy. I think this album is fantastic. I think they're out of their minds. They don't know what they're talking about. I am the #1 Issues fan. I'll be the judge of whether this album is good or not. And I will say that this is, I think this may be their finest work. I wish there was more music like this. I do too. The reason why there is not more music like this is because there are very, 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 very fucking few people who can do this. Like, how many people could write this, let alone play it? You know what I mean? This is, and perform it. There's such a strange, specific sound that really requires these exact people to pull it off. I think that's the reason why, you know, I was sort of hoping, and I still hope that there'd be more like R&B core bands, but I think it's just, it's so difficult to do this stuff that I think that's why you don't hear more of it. Guitar and B or jazz, DJAZZ, like gent plus jazz. Very interesting progressive stuff. If you haven't checked this album out, definitely do, because it is certified. It is a certified 10 out of 10 classic. You heard it here. Who gave it a 10 out of 10? I did. It's my channel. I can say what I want. That's what I think. 10 out of 10 classic. All right, that does it for this edition of 10 out of 10 albums. No skips. Stay tuned. We will be back with more in our next episode. What did Rachel Lee Cook smell like?